Hey, welcome to the Soul Pod. This is Stacy. This video is for you if you've started to notice how political differences are affecting your friendships, your family relationships, maybe even your work relationships. And if you want to start feeling less triggered by those things that are getting you. Before I get going, I got to say, I had to talk myself into doing this video. That's how uncomfortable talking about political differences is in the world today, and in particular in America, where I'm at, where even the slightest thing off topic where you think you may be hinting that you think different than someone else can turn into some weird discomfort, some strange, awkward social moment. So, because of that, I'm leaning into this because I think it's a very important topic. To be clear, I'm not going to take a political position here. I have zero interest in doing that. It doesn't serve any purpose. It actually would go against what it is I'm trying to accomplish here. There's a big problem in the US right now. And we've for years focused on racism, which is a really important topic to focus on. And I think we've made amazing strides in the last, well, in my lifetime, it's been a massive difference. There's another problem that's massively growing, and it's increasing, not decreasing. And it seems to have potentially huge downstream negative effects, potentially for society. And it's what I call partyism. Partyism is looking at and judging someone based on their political affiliation or your assumption of their political affiliation. You may be right, you may be wrong, but you have a knee-jerk reaction to them, right? There are symptoms and signs that you might be falling into this, and I think we're all really good at recognizing when other people are doing it to us, but it's not as easy to recognize when we're doing it to them. There's some great value in understanding when you are, because when you do notice that, you can find ways, and I'll share some, in fact, that you can start to shift your thinking and open your heart a little bit more and be less likely, in fact, to have arguments and discomforts and weird, awkward social situations because of political stuff. So let's look at some of the symptoms. The first symptom is getting triggered by things like the color of someone's hat, their bumper sticker, a yard sign, the car they're driving, you know, anything at all that makes you have that reflexive judgment that sometimes happens. That's number one. When you catch yourself avoiding or dismissing someone because of their political beliefs or your assumption of their political beliefs based on a nugget of information, like maybe a car sticker. And then another really big one, and I think this is one that many people fall into, is judging an entire group by the actions of a few. There are some people who do or say horrible things that happen to be wearing the wrong color shirt or the wrong team jersey, team blue or team red, who it's real easy if you're on one of those on the opposite team, to judge the entire group based on the actions of one doorknob who just goes off and says ridiculous things or does ridiculous things. Now, just like with racism, you can't take one person and assume that everyone in that group is the same as that person based on that person's actions. It's unfair, it's ridiculous, and it doesn't make any sense. Partyism is the same way. You can't assume that because one person in that party acted or said something in particular, that all the rest of them are the same person. It doesn't make any sense, and it's very close-hearted to think that way. So recognizing when any of these sorts of things happen or when these triggers happen in you will help you actually start to pull back on that. The first step really is to recognize your own nonsense when you fall into that. Before we dive into how to go ahead and fix those things, I want to talk about how it plays out. If you look at partyism right now, partyism in America, I think, is at its peak as far as I can tell. You see people's yard signs getting torn down during the election. You see people's cars being vandalized over bumper stickers. These are crazy and wild things. They don't make any sense. Now, this is worst case scenario stuff, right? Like the average person, you and me, even if we get triggered by something that we think tells us something about the person in the vehicle, we're probably not going to act that insane, right? But that's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario, like the lighter scenario is, when we see something that triggers something inside of us and makes us judge, we have these negative emotions about it, right? That's the light version. That's the entry level before you get to that vandalizing someone's car moment, where when you see something like that that triggers you, and it makes you judge someone before you even know them sometimes. Like, it's one thing to know someone and actually have some sense of who they are based on conversations, and you can kind of extrapolate. But a total stranger who just has a bumper sticker or whatever, a yard sign that says they disagree with the candidate that you voted for, that's outrageous that we would assume that we would know anything more than they've made a decision, any more than they should know that we've made a decision. These are strange things. Before we dive into the last part of it, I wanna as a test say this. Um, for a moment, consider that you know me. Consider that you know me. Do you like me? I mean, so far, you think I'm an okay guy? I mean, am I somebody you'd want to have a conversation with in person? You watch my video, so I would hope that the answer would be, yeah, you're all right. Now, consider for a moment your political position and assume that mine is the opposite. I like that other candidate. I supported that other candidate. How does that make you feel about me? Do you feel something when you think about that? Something dark, something visceral, some trigger? I don't like your candidate. I like my candidate. You feel that? If you do, this next section is going to be really helpful for you. By the way, we don't know if I like your candidate or not, so I'm not going to talk about that. These are the tools. How do we change it? How do we go about changing this? How do we catch ourselves and become better people because we catch ourselves falling into partyism? Much like somebody should catch themselves if they're falling into racism, see themselves thinking ridiculous thoughts about someone based on a very small piece of information that they have about them. These are the steps. Number one, recognize when you're starting to judge and get triggered. This is the first step. Just recognizing that feeling we were just talking about, where I said, what if I supported a different candidate? When you recognize that feeling's powerful, because that is a piece of information about yourself that you can take and you can turn. First step, recognizing that inside of yourself and saying, oh, wow, I just got triggered. When you're having a conversation, step number two, when you're having a conversation, try to find common ground. If you know the person thinks different than you and you happen to get drawn into somebody saying something, instead of feeling the need to defend the other side, try to find something that you both agree on. Great sentences like, hey, wow, yeah, it's interesting. We do think different. And I know that we're a lot alike, though. So it's interesting that we came to different conclusions on that. Let's figure out what it is that we can agree on. What is it that, we can agree on about your person and my person? What is it we can agree on about how the nation should be run? Rather than looking for differences, look for ways you can connect, look for common ground. Finally, and this is really important, and this takes more work because it's so easy to fall into this trap. Don't allow yourself to be drawn into arguments. Don't be drawn into arguments or drawn into defending. Avoid that completely. Like number two is a great way to do this. When you see somebody try to, start that, and some people are reflexive about it. They just need to fight. You can just dismiss yourself from something like that. But if it's just a soft thing, like an offhand comment, you can say, oh yeah, I know sometimes we think differently, but let's find some common ground if you're up for it. Oftentimes, and I've had this turn into really lovely conversations for me, just finding common ground. And the reality is, we all have people in our lives like this. We all have like a family member or a friend, or I have friends I went to school with who've been friends with me for decades, and really good people. And we don't agree politically on things, but it doesn't mean that I love them less. It doesn't mean that I have less respect for them as humans. We all took in information from essentially the same sources and came to different conclusions. That makes for a great conversation if you've got a good person to talk to. So find common ground if you can, because that's where we start repairing this thing and turn this boat around. Right now, it's getting worse. It only gets better by you and I, one person at a time, trying to improve this situation, try to make it better, try to understand and open our hearts more, and live with a bit more empathy instead of judgment. So the next time you see a yard sign or see a bumper sticker, or see a car, or see a hat that triggers you, try one of these steps. The biggest one, and the one you'll use the most, is just recognizing. Just recognizing and asking yourself, does this serve me to judge someone based on a little piece of data point? Does it serve me? Does it serve the overall good of the world? Because it doesn't. You know it doesn't. And it doesn't make your day better either. Thanks for being here, and I will talk to you on the next video.